Let's bring in the front bench to assess what's happening. Former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant is here. He's the CEO of Space Canada. Shakir Chambers worked in Prime Minister Stephen Harper's office before becoming a policy advisor to the International Trade Minister. He's now a principal at Earnscliffe Strategies. CTV News political analyst and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair is here, as is Laura Stone. She's a Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody. Great to see you. Tom, I'll start with you. I was listening closely to the Mr. Van Couverden, the Parliamentary Secretary, to the Environment Minister. It seems as though they've sort of sharpened their defense of what's been going on lately, and in particular, even today's report. They've interpreted it as, hey, we've got to do a lot more of what we're doing and a lot faster, and the Conservatives are kind of dragging us down. Do you think that that line of argument is going to work politically?
No, it's not going to work politically on either end, because Canadians who care a lot about the fight against climate change, who are worried about what kind of country and world we're going to leave to future generations, are very disappointed that Mr. Trudeau has indeed abandoned a key component of his climate fight. So what did we learn today from Jerry DeMarco? Well, we're not even on track, even if things had been going well, to meet our obligations as set down. That's the same report, Vassy, that Julie Gelfand, the previous Commissioner of Sustainable Development, had made, and go all the way back to when they signed Kyoto. This is my favorite quote of the Liberals on climate change. My old buddy, who was there at the time when the Liberals signed it, he said, look, he was the chief of staff to Jean Chrétien, and he said this, that the reason that the Liberals signed Kyoto was to galvanize public opinion. So Eddie Goldenberg was essentially admitting, and he said so in so many words, that the Liberals did not have a plan. And that's been the case ever since. They think that they only have to show up and point to the Conservatives and say, they're climate change deniers, and that somehow that makes the Liberals better, even though they're never getting it done. So what we're going through today is a bit of play acting, because the decision, which was precipitous, to change the rules for fuel oil is going to have repercussions, as I mentioned, on people who care about climate change. It's going to have repercussions in provinces like Ontario, where you use a different fuel that's still going to be taxed. So you're going to have a carbon tax on natural gas, which is less polluting, but you're going to have no carbon tax on fuel oil, which pollutes a great deal. So across the board, this was a boneheaded move. Oh, and just by the way, what they're telling their MPs in Atlantic Canada is, go to your voters and say to them, we're pausing this for 3 years. So whatever you do, don't vote for us, because you're going to get hit with this thing in 3 years anyway. It was a three strikes you're out move by Trudeau. It was ill-considered. And to hear him again today emoting for the ages about the fact that the Conservatives are bad and they're leading the fight against climate change, nothing could be further from the truth.
Brian, I wanted to get your take also on the way in which the Liberals are positioning this. It may be true that the Conservatives do not have anything close to a comprehensive plan, but does that, I guess, is it politically salient to use that as a defense when your own plan is being criticized?
I'm not sure it's really going to get people off of the criticisms or off of the focus of the Trudeau government. But I mean, to put it in context here, I think we've seen it election after election over the last little while, that any time that the Liberals feel that the Conservatives are showing any little bit of light, that they may be what would be considered by many to be too far on the right, they're going to jump and pounce on it. So they certainly are hoping that this is an opportunity to do that, and or trying to sort of deflect with that in mind, basically saying, if you question anything on climate change, it's an opportunity for us to jump on the fact that you're not taking it seriously, you're too right-wing for where Canadians want us to be when it comes to tackling climate change. So I'm not surprised to hear that argument, but I don't think it's going to really work, at least not right in the heat of the moment right now. People are very much focused on the Trudeau government, rightfully so. I mean, there are some challenges with what they announced. I'm not convinced that even in Atlantic Canada it's going to be as helpful as they think politically. I think the perception for Atlantic Canadians right now might be, oh, okay, we got a bit of a carve out. Maybe that's a positive, which, obviously the policy applies nationally, but given the proportions, it can be spun like that. So maybe people are sort of like, yeah, okay, I can see that being good, but it's not going to help somebody next week with their bills, right? So I just don't know if they're going to get as much hay out of it, even in Atlantic Canada. So to Tom's point, I'm not sure I'll say it as sort of passionately as Tom, but I definitely do think that the announcement is a challenge, and I'm not sure that the deflection that they're using is going to work right now. Maybe in a campaign, but not in the heat of the moment.
Shakir, does a hit to their credibility on climate, which, their climate policies have done well in certain constituencies, right? Like they have worked for them in previous elections among a certain constituency, of voters. Does a hit to their credibility on that electorally impact them potentially?
Listen, I think the Liberals often brandish themselves as this party of the environment, right? So when you see a report that once again our government's not going to meet their targets, I think it is a bit of a blow. And I think especially when you look at the report and they were looking at the measures the government implemented and how much they would reduce emissions, and you see a significant amount of measures have no targets associated with them, have no timelines associated with them. It just makes it hard for folks to realize, what is the government prioritizing in terms of this environmental policy? Why is a carbon tax a signature policy for this government if they can't even articulate how much emissions it would reduce over a significant period? And then you had Mr. Lansman on here, obviously using that as a vulnerability to talk about the consumer angle on the carbon tax and why it's not necessary. I think for this government, and I think Tom said it very well, for this government, having this carbon in Atlantic Canada took this issue, in my view, from one about the carbon tax being solely about environment and emissions reduction to one about affordability. The way the Liberals justify this was on the affordability grounds. And I think if you want to have a conversation about does the carbon tax help with affordability measures, I think you're going to lose that discussion. I think that's where the Liberals find themselves right now. They're having the wrong discussion and the wrong argument about carbon pricing, and the premiers have also turned their back on them on this particular issue, given how everybody's feeling that affordability crunch in this economic environment.
Last word to you on that, Laura.
Well, Shakir sort of stole my argument, but I don't think he knew he was doing that. No, I think that is the biggest problem for the Liberals, is that the environment issue has now been conflated with affordability, and it's going to cause the public to pause and think, what exactly are we achieving here? And it's causing them to look at their own finances, to look at their own spending. They're already feeling the pinch, and it's been hammered very successfully, I think, by the Conservatives, that the carbon tax is making life more expensive on a variety of fronts. Of course, the Liberals have counter defensive to that, talking about world events and things that have been out of their control. But I think that's the thing that's going to hit hardest for them, is the public is going to look at this and say, what we're doing right now doesn't seem to be making a lot of sense. And so it's now been tied to affordability. It's been tied to these extra costs. And I don't think that the Liberals have a winning argument on this. I will say, though, that turning around and pointing the finger at the Conservatives has been a successful strategy in the past. I think there will be a lot more pressure on the Conservatives in an election campaign to produce a plan, to produce arguments about how they're going to fight climate change. People, especially young people, do care about this. So it's not that they're going to be off the hook, but the Liberals have to do a much better job at communicating exactly what they've done, and how it's actually going to reduce emissions than I think they were able to present to the public today.